Lecture C07, double facades or double layered facades will express the general systematics of double layered facades with an outer layer cavity and an inner layer and its functionality as a system. The main idea is to have an outer layer, mostly single layered glass layer, to create a buffer for an inner double-layered facade to prevent the too much air movement, so that sunscreen systems could be simpler and easier positioned as one aspect, and as a second aspect to be a kind of a trap, a glass house trap for sun, especially in the in-between periods, to allow a heat up of this inner cavity and then having this heated up air being used in the building as a system. This is, say, the main idea of this type of facades. We obviously have a history with that. The box to window, here a sample from San Sebastian, which are small balconies made out of single layered outer layers of glass. Then there's an inner window, also single layered inner window. And similar to what I explained for the modern double facades, this is used as a glass house trap to have sun heating up the in-between cavity, the in-between space, and then having this tempered air to be used at the inside as a system. We can clearly identify that this whole activity with, say, double facades and all the additional functionality which is brought into facades is linked to Lloyd's of London, where they developed with this small sketch by Mike Davis. The idea of having all layers, all functions brought in this one system. So an outer layer to cover, a middle layer to collect energy. PV was sketched at that time. The opportunity to have something transparent and flip it to be intransparent, and then a heating system at the inside. He sketched that whole thing in 3 centimeter. And obviously, technically, there was no opportunity to get this done. But very engineering-wise, the problems were separated, and by separating these problems, they were able to solve this entire thing. So we see a ventilation outlet here. We see a ventilation inlet at the bottom part. We see some opaque areas which are light transmitting. We see some transparent areas which obviously allow the view to the outside. So the idea to to get all these functions integrated in this one component, which did not work at that time technically, was then dismantled, demounted, and then brought in several levels in the same systematic. We can define this as the starting point of integrating function into facades which are more than just enveloping it. Nowadays, we talk about the double facades, and we have a set of variations of this double facades. The boxed window, as already explained, this is the modern boxed window where we have a floor height box, which has some air inlets at the bottom, some air outlets at the top, and then this glass trap, or this glass house as a trap for the sun to heat up this inner environment, and then having this heated up air being used at the inside, and also being an additional insulation barrier in the wintertime for the system. You can obviously imagine that in summer, when it tend to overheat, you need to be able to have enough airflow to create a clear draft within the system to get rid of the heat which is within this double facade as a system. Next level, most simple version of double facade, second skin facade. We see on the main picture the Double X building in Hamburg, and pure, quite simple normal building, concrete skeleton structure, and then an entire layer of glass in front of it, which is simple installed, technically not that complex to reach, which has an air inlet pretty much at the bottom and an air outlet pretty much at the top. And you can imagine that this creates quite a reasonable draft within this system, but it also creates the difficulty of having polluted air at the top part and, say, less or better air at the bottom part. And especially in cases of fire, this tends to be quite complex. So imagine a fire here. This is something which you, say, clearly need to keep under control and design wisely that it does not appear as a problem. This could be done different by being able to entirely open this second skin facade, a concept which I personally like very much, because in this situation you're able to entirely open the system in summertime, so then it's a single layered facade, even with some shadowing devices, and in wintertime you entirely close it, and then you're taking benefit of the heated up cavity, the heated up air in the cavity. Due to this fact of the difficulties of having an entire building in the full height being covered with one layer of glass, we developed the corridor facade, so-called corridor facade. Corridor facades, taking this picture, means this is one corridor floor height, which has an air inlet at one point and an air outlet at the other point to prevent shortcuts between the different floors, and then air is heated up in here, used at the inside, and then leaving the building at the outside. This sample project in Düsseldorf, Stadttor in Düsseldorf, is one of the very first one which was built, and we see the air inlet is in here, then the air is used in inside, then the air outlet gets at this point. And when we look at the section, we see it's a huge device with, say, huge flaps to open and close. This is a dimension of 1 meter. As said, one of the very early ones, we nowadays know a lot more about how this technically functions, so we can decrease this down to 30 by 30 centimeter. But at that time, this was the state of the art of the possibility to use. When we look at the corridor facades, obviously the height of a corridor is the disadvantage, because of that we create less draft by temperature within this cavity, which ended up in the idea of a so-called chimney boxed window facade. Chimney in the means of having one chimney going for some 7 floors, again a project in Düsseldorf, Arak, 7 floors chimney, which is penetrated by air, creates a certain draft within the system, and then next to the chimney each floor has boxed windows which have an air inlet, get this air heated up, used at the inside, and then get the air into the chimney, and by the chimney creating the draft to get the air out of the system. This is this facade in a close-up view. You see the chimney goes through the system here. There's the next chimney, which is this one, and then this is a boxed window which has an air inlet here and then gets into the chimney, and then this is the other box window, air inlet here, and then it gets into the chimney as a system. Obviously, this is one of the most advanced version to build and to deal with, and you need to maintain it well, you need to engineer it well, and you have to get it correctly linked to the entire service system of the building to work precisely. Next solution of this type of setups is the so-called alternating facade. We have a double facade in this area, double facade in this area. It's a single additional layer of glass in front of it and a simple window next to this facade. The double facade works well in wintertime, spring and autumn, but does not work that perfect in the summertime. In summertime, you want to have a simple facade, and in this sample, the simple facade is done with an openable window and then a fixed sun shading device at the outside. Project is in Stuttgart. When we look at, say, this range and how they developed the boxed window, the second skin facade, corridor facade, so having the problem of a direct draft within the surface, changing this into horizontal corridors, getting these two combined into the chimney and the boxed window, or alternatively having an outer layer of glass for the double facade and then a simple window to be added. And obviously but that's the next lecture, the next step would be to add other service functions to this facade, which we will see in some later projects, Posttower in Bonn, where the first time all the service devices, the HVAC system, were added to this type of facades. Difficulties which we do have with double facades, no reason for not mentioning. Obviously, it's an additional layer of glass, which means additional costs in installing it, getting it built. But secondly, also additional costs in maintenance. You need to just clean another layer of glass. But there are other aspects which have to be taken into account. We are dealing with a kind of an conditioning unit for the building, and if this conditioning unit, which helps to condition the building to its purpose, is used as, say, an additional balcony with a secure situation. That's not a very nice one. This is a sample in Frankfurt, where they actually use this inner space as a smoker's zone. And if you think that this inner space is actually the lung of the system, it's not very nice to have the smokers using it. So misuse of this type of systems, that's something which really can be a difficult aspect. Another one, acoustics. We have an inner layer of facade. We have an additional outer layer of facade, even if it's single glazed. This is quite a hard surface, and any noise reflection from one floor to another floor or from one office to the other office tend to be a problem. So we have to clearly engineer this in a good manner to make sure that there's no cross reflection between the one floor and the other floor, or the one office and the other office in this system. Clearly identified a problem which happened. And then obviously also the overheating. So if we create a glass house, and we like to use the glass, the overheated area in between in winter, for example, we have to make sure that there's enough ventilation to get always fresh air and to allow to use that fresh air. But if it gets too hot, this may overheat. So we need to make sure that, especially in summertime, the overheating system the overheating is prevented by enough air outlets. So there needs to be a good draft of air flow in the system, which is the one aspect. And the other aspect, if humidity appears from the inside getting into this cavity, this may end up in condensate, especially in winter situations, at the top part of this inner layer of the outer glass sheet, which again means that we have to make sure that the ventilation outlet is large enough that we are able to ventilate all the humidity which gets into the system wisely and directly out of the system. General comments about double facades. Again, where this whole package comes from, and again, I'm going to stop.